Welcome. Uh, Good afternoon. I don't see you, but I'm pleased you have joined us today as we host our 19th annual European Union keynote address. I am Emmanuel Rota, and I am the director of the European Union Center. Before I give the floor to our colleague, Colleen Murphy, who will introduce our esteemed guest, Her Excellency Karin Olofsdotter, I want to take just a few minutes to tell you about the European Union Center and the European Union Day's keynote address, which we are proud to host every year as part of our European Union Days at the University of Illinois. For many years now, it has been a cherished tradition of ours to invite an ambassador to give the keynote address that, in our minds, celebrate what is still a major accomplishment in human history, the coming together of nation states with a long history of wars and conflict to create a peaceful union. Through the years, we have met many European ambassadors, and we have come to admire their professionalism, intelligence, and admirable service to their countries, to the EU, and to our transatlantic friendship. We're grateful to all the ambassadors who visited us, and we feel immense respect for their job and for the people who work with them to make international diplomacy possible. It is therefore with extreme sadness that at the beginning of this week, we learned the news of the killing of His Excellency Luca Attanasio, Italian ambassador to the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mustafa Milabo, his driver, and Vittorio Iacovacci, the carabiniere assigned to the ambassador's protection. I want to take 30 seconds to remember them here today for their sacrifice. Since we established the European Union Center in 1998, we have been the point of reference on campus in Illinois and often in the Midwest for the research, the education, and the transatlantic conversation on the European Union. As part of our educational mission, we have created the only Master in European Studies in the United States. Thanks to the Center's success in securing both European funds, we are a Jean Monnet Center of Excellence, and American funds, we are a Title VI Center, we not only promote initiatives directly, but we also support high-quality projects on Europe from researchers, educators, and civil society organizations. Among our many initiatives, allow me to mention just one that is particularly dear to our hearts because it bears the name of the founder and first director of our center, the Larry Niels Prize. Every year, we give this cherished recognition to the best contribution in European and transatlantic relations studies published in the United States. This year's winners are Professor J.J. Spoon from the University of Pittsburgh and Niels Ring from the University of Wisconsin-Madison for their edited volume titled The European Union and Beyond, Multi-Level Governance, Institutions, and Policymaking. You will have an opportunity to hear from them in April during our annual conference. For the European Union Center, the organization of the keynote address is both a reason of pride and a challenge. It is therefore always an opportunity to recognize the European Union Center team and their work that makes our events possible. Our outreach coordinator, Sidney Lazarus, our academic coordinator, Lucas Harry, our associate director, Jonathan Larson, and our office manager, Kim Rice. Thank you so much. I also want to mention a few distinguished guests virtually with us today. Karin Abercrombie, Honorary Consul of Sweden in Chicago, Anna Patel, Honorary Vice Consul of Sweden in Chicago. They have been encouraging and helping us to pursue our plan to invite Her Excellency today, and we are very, very grateful for both. Finally, let me acknowledge Malu Monago, Honorary Consul of Swedish in Cleveland, and Reitu Mabokela, Vice Provost for International Affairs and Global Strategies of our own University of Illinois. And finally, Larry Neal Emeritus Professor of Economics and Founding Director of the European Union Center. I sincerely welcome you to our European Union keynote address. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Colleen Murphy, who will be introducing the ambassador. Dr. Murphy is the Roger and Stephanie Joslin Professor of Law and Professor of Philosophy and Political Science at the University of Illinois. Since 2014, she has also served as Director of the Women and Gender in Global Perspectives program at the University of Illinois in the Illinois Global Institute. We are delighted that Professor Murphy can be with us this morning. Please join me in welcoming Colleen Murphy to our 19th Annual European Union Keynote Address.
Thank you, Dr. Rota Manuel, for that kind introduction and for the opportunity to be part of this event. It is a distinct honor to introduce Her Excellency Karin Olofsdotter, Ambassador of Sweden to the United States. Her Excellency took up her post as Ambassador of Sweden to the United States on September 1st of 2017. Her career in foreign service started back in 1994 with her first posting to the Embassy of Sweden in Moscow. In the years following, she worked in security policy and defense issues, as well as in numerous leadership posts within the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, including serving as Chief of Staff for several of its ministers. She has served as part of the Swedish delegation to NATO, as well as the Swedish EU representation in Brussels, working on European security policy and defense issues. In 2008, the ambassador was appointed as Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy of Sweden in Washington, and in 2011 entered her first ambassadorial position as Ambassador of Sweden to Hungary. Prior to assuming the role as Ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Olofsdotter served as Director General for Trade at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Her address today is titled Rights, Representation, and Resources, Gender Equality in Sweden and the EU. Following the ambassador's talk, there will be a brief question and answer period. Please post your questions in the chat or Q&A box either during the talk or at its conclusion, and we will curate the questions to continue the conversation. Please take it away, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, and of course, I would have loved to be in your area of the United States. I love Chicago. I visited, and Illinois is a fantastic state. But I guess this is as good as it gets when it comes to our COVID times, and I really do think that hopefully we have found a new way of also communicating that we will continue with this even when we can meet. So I've been promised an invitation live to come and see you, and I can't wait. Even though it's nice to be here in Washington, of course, this is a fantastic country with so many places to visit. And I, as was told, I've lived a lot in the United States and I absolutely love this country. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be your keynote speaker today. That's, of course, a great honor for me and for my country to be highlighted in this way. And I'm very glad that you are interested in our feminist foreign policy and how we work with gender rights, because I think Sweden really is a pioneering country in this field. So I will go through this, and I really hope we will have a discussion at the end of this. So I have three main messages that I will go through today. The first one is Sweden is one of the most gender equal countries in the world. And this is not by chance. We've been working at it for many, many years. But the last years, we've had a feminist government and a feminist foreign policy as the first country in the world. And gender equality, my second message, is not just about fairness. It's also about peace, stability, and economic prosperity. And my third message is that by focusing on equal work opportunities and building back better after the COVID pandemic, we can take great strides to a more gender equal world. We have an opportunity that we mustn't miss coming out of this. So, first of all, the case for gender equality, and many of you know all this already, but still. All countries, we all have to make priorities as individuals, as communities, as countries or groups of countries like the European Union. And then we need to make these priorities to determine how we want to spend our limited financial, political and social capital. And we have chosen to make gender equality a top priority. We have a feminist government, as I said, and a feminist foreign policy led by a man, I must say. It's a man who has come up with that he wants to be the first feminist government in the world. We pursue gender equality at home, we promote it in the European Union, and we advocate it for in conversations with our partners and allies and most countries around the world. So then, why do we do this? Well, the daily lives of women and girls, and we are half the population, if you have forgotten, we are still marked by bias, discrimination, and systematic subordination. Consider then the 3 R's which we base our feminist foreign policy: rights, resources, and representation. So when it comes to rights, did you know, or do you know, that 104 countries around the world have laws that prevent women from carrying out certain jobs? Or that 45 countries lack laws against domestic violence? And when it comes to resources, did you know that women own less than 20% of the world's land resources? And in many countries are that not allowed to own land at all. And did you know that in today's digitalized world, 300 million fewer women than men own a mobile phone? And then when it comes to representation, I don't know if you can guess how many countries have a female head of state or government. 23 out of 193, or 12% of the countries, have a female head of state or government. Women make up half the population of the world, but the majority of the world's countries have never had a female head of state or government. So is all well on the Western Front, one can ask oneself. Well, what does this have to do with us? Successful modern people in the richest country in the world, as you are, and we are there as well. Also in Sweden, many people wonder if we have not already solved much of this gender disparity in our parts of the world. And of course, it is true, Sweden is consistently ranked as one of the most gender equal countries in the world. For example, Sweden topped the European Gender Equality Index in 2020. And the progress that we have made towards gender equality has contributed to our high levels of employment and growth. At 80%, Sweden has the highest female labor force participation rate in the European Union. And that is then one of the highest in the world as well. And in our government or our parliament, 46% are women, almost half of them. And our majority of our current government ministers are also women. So also in the European Union, a lot of gains have been made in the past decade. We have seen a higher number of women in the labor market and progress in securing better education and training for women and girls. Gender equality is a core value of the new EU Commission, who recently adopted a new and progressive gender equality strategy. But unfortunately, the world's gender challenges are not something confined to the low and medium income countries. Do you remember what I told you about the majority of countries never had an elected female head of state or government? Sweden is one of them. We have still not had a female prime minister. And for all our success in government, in the private sector, women only make up 30% of managers, and only 9% of CEOs of listed companies are women in Sweden. The situation is slightly worse in the EU as a whole, to be truthful, even worse in the United States, where it's 25% and then 5%. So much for representation. Despite all these significant gains that we have made in the last couple of decades, Swedish women still earn less than men for the same work, about 11% for non-adjusted and 5% for adjusted. In the EU as a whole, women earn 16% less than men, and in the United States, 19% less. So much for resources. And As the Me Too movement proved, women across our country still have to fight for their right to their own bodies, their right to go to work without being sexually harassed, and the right to be judged on the same professional merits as men. Then coming to COVID and gender. Unfortunately, the situation for women has deteriorated during the pandemic. Women are overrepresented among healthcare workers and low-paid service jobs, meaning it is primarily women we rely on to treat our sick and keeping our lives running, while we put them at risk and they may have trouble taking care of children who are out of school. The EU Institute for Gender Equality has also shown that women have been disproportionately affected by the secondary effects of the pandemic, including increases in domestic violence, higher layoff rates than men, and a further increase in women's share of unpaid household work. This applies across the European Union and assumably outside the European Union as well. So correcting these wrongs are primarily about fairness and rights. The world's nations have undertaken in legally binding conventions to respect, defend, and fulfill all people's human rights without any discrimination. It's nothing but unjust that there appears to be an exemption from these commitments covering half the world's population. So fairness should be enough. But to drive my point home, there are a number of additional reasons to work for gender equality, all based on research. The OECD estimates that increase in female labor employment account for 10 to 20% of overall average annual growth in Sweden and in the Scandinavian and Nordic countries over the last 50 years. Research also shows that homogeneous groups, whether they are in business or in government, make poorer decisions and take higher risks. In other words, gender equality makes the world richer. United Nations studies show that women's active participation in peace processes helps ensure that peace agreements are brokered and that the following peace is more sustainable. Similarly, women's participation helps make humanitarian operations more effective and also speeds up economic recovery after crisis. So in other words, gender equality makes the world more peaceful. There is also mounting evidence that equal political opportunities for men and women help societies build greater resilience to future crises, achieve stronger and more sustainable economic growth, and development that benefits all. In other words, gender equality makes the world safer and more prosperous. Women globally make or influence decisions on about 80% of total consumer spending. Yet, they are grossly underrepresented in decision-making positions in all sectors. That means that strategic decisions around trade and commerce are made by people who don't fully understand their target group. In other words, increased gender equality could also be good for business. In short, furthering gender equality means working not only for a more just world, but for a safer, more prosperous, and more peaceful world as well. So, in Sweden, we don't discount for other injustices in the world. Racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, and other forms of discrimination based on color, religion, sexual orientation, or otherwise are of course unacceptable and equally unjust. And Sweden strives to eliminate all in different ways, in different initiatives and programs. But remember that every other person of color, Jewish person, or homosexual is also a woman, and therefore often twice discriminated against. We must also not be blind to the strifes and injustices that are faced by men and boys. While there has been a powerful movement in the Western world to liberate women and girls from limiting expectations, in many places, boyhood and manhood is still narrowly defined in macho terms. These are not suited for everybody, and sometimes they are outright destructive. Girls get better education or better grades than boys do across all ages. Men are more likely than women to commit suicide and become alcoholics or drug users. So working for gender equality and factoring in gender in all policy analysis, what we call putting on your gender glasses, means seeing and addressing these challenges too, not only women's issues, but men's issues as well. The Swedish government strongly believes that gender equality benefits everyone, including boys and men. And research shows that more gender equal societies enjoy better health, stronger economies, and higher security. So we must fight discrimination in all forms, but gender equality is relevant for everybody, and achieving it has almost unparalleled potential to improve people's lives at home and abroad. So how do we get there? Well, now I have hopefully convinced you that promoting gender equality is worth prioritizing and perhaps knocking down a few open doors in the process. So let's talk about how we can get there. I want to raise three things in particular: the need for equal work opportunities as we rebuild our societies after the pandemic, and the need for dynamic collaboration between politics and grassroots. First, experience shows us that equal work opportunities is often the best way to empower women, economically, politically, and socially. When women are given an equal chance at careers ranging from law enforcement to the judicial and from politics to media, the narrative starts to change and women's perspectives starts to matter. It's therefore necessary to increase women's labor market participation and to create a level playing field between men and women in pursuing their careers. This is, of course, more complex than just having women work more, since women are also the predominantly caregiver at home. On average, women in the European Union spend 13 hours more than men every week on unpaid care and household work as well, of course. This is not only due to gender norms, but also lacking support and structures for families. Therefore, as the EU Commission puts it, in order for both men and women to engage in the labor market in an equal way, the puzzle of care in the private life of working women and men must be resolved. In Sweden, to address this dilemma, a broad expansion of the daycare and preschool system began already in the 1970s. Previously, women had made child-minding arrangements with the help of mothers or nannies, friends, and relatives. Now, all Swedish families can enjoy available, high-quality, and low-cost childcare. This support framework provides the opportunity for both parents to combine a career with family life, greatly advancing women's freedom to make life choices that were long reserved only for men. In 1974, Sweden is the first country in the world to replace gender-specific maternity leave with parental leave. In 1995, we introduced the first pappamånad, the first daddy month, with 30 days of leave reserved for the father on a use it or lose it kind of basis. Today, women and men are entitled to, and I know this is shocking to a lot of you Americans, are entitled to 480 days of paid parental leave. That is 16 months per child. 90 days of those are reserved for one parent or for each parent and cannot be transferred to the other parent. So reserving 3 months parental leave for each parent helped break the norm of only women taking care of newborns and very young children. In many workplaces today, including very much so the government offices, it would be seen as strange and almost irresponsible for fathers not to take at least a few months of parental leave. What this shift in norms has done is allowing mothers the option to return to work without losing valuable career opportunities by being left out of the workforce for too long. And for men, it has given fathers the once in a lifetime opportunity to bond with their newborn family members on their own terms, an opportunity many fathers cherish very much. Similar initiatives are taken by the European Union. In 2019, the EU adopted a work-life balance directive, which aims to improve families' access to family leave and flexible work arrangements. The EU Commission is also stepping up its effort to close the gender pay gap by implementing a holistic set of measures of its gender action plan. The Commission continues to fight gender stereotypes and combat violence against women, as well as bring about a behavioral change at sectoral level, for instance, through initiatives such as the Commission's strategy on women in digital or women in transport, an EU platform for change. By providing these support structures that families need in their everyday lives, we allow women and men to make their own equal decisions and priorities about career and family. This approach, considering the intersectionality of work, gender, and family, is perhaps the best way we know to achieve gender equality. This goes for Sweden and the EU and beyond. Second, as we build back our societies after the pandemic, building back better must include building back better for women. It means that looking at all the billions of euros being channeled through the European Union, as well as the trillions of dollars being channeled through the United States by the means of what is called gender budgeting. So gender budgeting means that you put on your gender glasses when you review every budget proposal. And this is what we do in Sweden. We do gender budgeting. And this is to make sure that they contribute to a more gender equal world or to the benefit of everyone. And just as an example, for instance, you may wonder how building lighting of a city, for example, what does that contribute to gender issues? Well, if you light walkways or bikeways in a better way, it's safer for people to be outside and for women in the evenings. That's, for instance, a very concrete example of how you can do gender budgeting and gender policies in areas that you maybe haven't thought about. And one example as well, another one, is to make sure female-dominated, often lower-paid professions such as teachers and healthcare workers get the support they need while we make sure that they stay safe. The same applies for tax breaks, infrastructure projects, and housing. By applying gender analysis to these new initiatives, we can make sure they consider not only top-level economics, but the needs of women, men, and families they are meant to serve. Thirdly, we need to work together to maximize our success, including through the EU-US transatlantic partnership. And as a test to my own powers of persuasion, or perhaps as homework for next week, I challenge you now to think about the 6 themes that the EU Commission and the High Representative presented to the new US administration through the use of your new gender glasses. I bet you that you will be able to think of several immediate, creative, and bold opportunities for common action in support of gender equality. And the paper that was produced by the Commission is called The EU and the US, a new transatlantic agenda for global change, and suggests the following common priorities. The first one, a principled partnership, global leadership through common values. The second one, working together for a healthier world, COVID-19 and beyond. The third one, working together to protect our planet and prosperity. 4, working together on technology, trade, and standards. And the last one, working together towards a safer, more prosperous, and more democratic world. So I would just like to conclude. I know the attention span of people watching Zoom is 17 seconds a time. So I'm very happy that so many of you are still on and hopefully listening. So in conclusion, Women and girls are still discriminated upon on a daily basis all over the world, including in rich countries. The pandemic has made the situation worse. The second one is that working for gender equality is working for fairness, but also for peace, stability, and economic prosperity for all people. 3, a key to a more gender equal world is providing support structures for families so that women and men are allowed fair and equal choices when it comes to work and family. The fourth one, when we build back our societies from the pandemic, building back better must include building back better for women and families. And the last one, we need to work together and use our gender glasses in all policy areas if we want to maximize our common output. So I was also asked to say a few words about women in diplomacy. What it is like to be a woman in diplomacy. Honestly, I have never really thought about it that way. Maybe it is because I come from an environment where I'm an only child and my parents always believed I could do anything without reservations. And I've always, as you heard from my CV, worked in kind of male-dominated areas, as previously at least, security, policy, and military affairs. But I never thought about myself being different, being a woman. And I usually don't do it now either. But of course, I know I get attention as the first female ambassador of Sweden to the United States. We are still only, I think, 30 female ambassadors here in Washington from all countries. But still, our foreign service, just like everyone else's, has been absolutely and completely dominated by men. We had our first female ambassador, Katarina Stopia was her name. She served as the government's envoy to Russia in the 1630s, but that was a while ago. But it took more than 300 years until our next female ambassador, a woman, Alva Myrdal, who was sent to India, was appointed in the 50s. And we had to wait until 1976 until we had our first female foreign minister. Her name was Karin Söder. And it was only in the 1970s that our foreign service started recruiting female political officers to a higher degree. Today, women are a slight majority in the foreign service. 50% of all managers are women and 40% of all ambassadors are women. Our current and former foreign ministers are both women, as is our current Minister of Trade. So I honestly believe that the bulk of Swedish diplomats have a conviction that diversity also means strength. So thank you so much for paying attention, and I really look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Olofsdottir. We have questions already, a queue that's building, so I'm going to take the questions as they come. The first one, it goes back to one of the points you made in the very beginning about Sweden having now a feminist government. And so could you just expand on what it means to have a feminist government?
Well, of course, when it was announced in 2014, when this government won, they've won one more time since then. We have 4 years of election cycle. The Prime Minister, a man, Stefan Löfven, declared that he was now representing a feminist government. And people were like, what does that actually mean? And he said, if we would have called it a gender equal government, people wouldn't have really paid attention. But when you use the word feminism, which is a bit more maybe politically charged word, people pay attention. So the key and what he really wanted to do with this was to show that, or the importance of, as I said, budget and legislation. We have to do a gender analysis for every budget post and every piece of legislation. Sometimes it's not relevant, but many more times than you think, it is relevant. For instance, what I talked about, cycling paths or what have you. So this is a way of highlighting that, through smaller measures or bigger measures, we can change. But we must always take active decisions to do this. And this is a way of advancing our society. So that's actually what it means. So every ministry in the government offices have to have a gender policy. So for the foreign ministry, it became about the 3 R's: right representation and resources for women. So we apply that to all our foreign policy, and we also apply it to our development cooperation. There, of course, we had already worked on women's issues, but made it more clear and more people are more aware of it. And actually, when I visited Chicago 2 or 3 years ago, I talked to I think it was the deputy governor, and raised this with her, and she became extremely interested. So we then sent information on how we do, for instance, gender budgeting. I don't know if that information has made it out to you inhabitants in Illinois, but she was very interested in it. And we have realized that on a local level local, Illinois is basically bigger than Sweden. There is a great interest in how this is done. And it's not as complicated as you might think. And also, just everyone out there, I mean, you can ask me about anything when it comes to, Sweden or what have you. It doesn't have to do with the issues that I've been talking about in my discussion. So if there's anything that kept you sleepless wondering about Sweden, don't hesitate.
Wonderful. That was terrific. There's a number of questions in the queue that are asking about sort of how do you explain what paves the way to receptivity for the kind of laws and policies that you're talking about that solidify a commitment to gender equality. So in looking at, you can take disparities in leave after adoption or birth of a child between Sweden and the United States, for example, that you mentioned. So in your view, what, both from the perspective of Sweden, looking at the factors that you think really are at the core of the commitment to gender equality and the receptivity to that, and then looking comparatively at the US in sort of, given your length of time living here and coming to understand the United States, what explains the differences you find in that area?
Well, of course, this is not something you create overnight. And we've all, both the United States and Sweden, we've been working with women's rights for a long time. It's basically 100 years, I think, in each country since women got the right to vote, for instance. Also in the United States, a lot of women are part of the labor market. I mean, it's lots higher in Sweden. It's about 80% or 82% here. I think it's 67% of women part of the labor market, or if even less, but still. So I think the biggest change factor was that we don't have, a couple is not taxed as one entity. We have individual personal tax system. So your tax is not dependent on who you are married to. That pushed women to go out into the labor market. Then as that happened, there was then a need for creating a child support system, a daycare system, because of course, most parents, men and women, they want to leave their children in the best and safest environment. So what happens in Sweden is that usually the parents are home for 18 months with the child. So the child starts at daycare when the child is 18 months usually. We put very big trust into these daycare centers. They are usually very good, extremely high quality, and so on. So we put we trust them. Of course, no one wants to put their child in a place which you don't trust, So I think these two reforms, first the taxation, and then the creation of the childcare system has really paved way for women's entry into the labor market at a bigger scale. And also in Sweden, we pay higher taxes, but of course then healthcare, education, elderly care, all that is kind of paid through our tax system, so we never have to pay out of pocket. But it's very hard to sustain a family in Sweden on one income. So it's also from an income perspective necessary to work, and most people want to work. So this is the things that have gradually changed. And this is almost 50 years ago that these huge reforms were made. So that's important. But still, as I said, very few women in Sweden are CEOs or have managerial positions. That's something in the public sector, a lot of women are managers, but in the private sector, we have not reached that far at all. Maybe it is because we're classically been a country full of engineering companies. I mean, many of you recognize our companies that we've been around for hundreds of years: Ericsson, AstraZeneca, ABB, lots of them, IKEA since the 50s. So many of them are coming out of the engineering field. So maybe that's why we still have few women, because fewer women study engineering. But anyway, so when I look at the United States, I do think you have a huge untapped resource here. And I can completely understand why American families cannot afford childcare. I know it's very expensive. If you have more than one child, the one parent's income is, that income usually goes to just pay for childcare. And then it's deemed not economically viable for both parents to work, etc., etc. But I mean, it's a choice of how you want it to be, but you could definitely grow your economy lots if you would get more women into the labor market.
I think
Colleen?
Yes,
Can I ask a couple of questions from the chat? Because I think one is from a student and the other one is from a 10-year-old. So we always give precedence to young girls who want to ask questions to ambassadors. Our friend who is 10 is asking, as a proposal, what would happen, particularly in the embassy, if men and women would trade jobs every now and then? What would be the consequence of having days where you're supposed to work in the position of your colleagues of a different gender? What would happen in the embassy? I don't know how you want to answer the question, but I think it's a very interesting way of looking at the question. The other question instead is from a student, and it's a question about service versus universal basic income. How do you think the question of gender equality could be better addressed with a universal basic income that would allow parents to decide where to spend their money, or with providing services for the collectivity along the lines of the European welfare state?
Yes, well, I don't know if it would make such a, well, maybe it would be. I'm a woman and I'm the head of the embassy. My deputy, she's also a woman. So maybe the male colleagues would enjoy being head of the embassy. Otherwise, we're actually 50-50 here, half men and half women. And women work with the security policy, men work with development cooperation. And so I don't know if it would make such a big difference, actually. And I don't know, it's hard for me to say, as I've always been a woman, if it would, my managerial style would be different if I was a man. I hope not, but you never know. But of course, a lot of the support staff are still women, and there I think we need to have more men who are interested in those jobs as well, so that it becomes equal. Because my experience is that if you're in a workplace where it's only men or only women, it doesn't do as well as if you're mixed. It's much more fun to be in a mixed environment with men and women and people of different backgrounds and so on. That's much more enjoyable and makes the work environment much nicer. So that's good. But never, ever, ever think that you can't do a job because you're one sex or the other. We can all do everything, no matter who we are. So that's important to keep in mind. Well, universal basic income, I don't know if you then mean that, kind of everyone should have an income kind of granted by the state, and then on top of that, you could have a job, but you could always keep this. Well, we don't, in Sweden, that's not how it's done. We are, a perfect market economy, but with a welfare state. So in a way, which is very interesting, there is a book called Is the Swede Also a Human Being by a Professor Trägård. I think it's translated into English. Well, anyway, the idea behind the Scandinavian model is in a way, I mean, I'm simplifying now, in a way similar to the American dream. You know, what happened was in the 19th century, 1/4 of our population left for the United States. So of course, and that was the young and the able and coming from very poor circumstances, but they wanted to take a chance for a better life. It was religious persecution, it was poverty, and the same issues as all over Europe. Anyway, 1/4 left. So then the government at the time decided, okay, we must have general education for everyone. So in the 1860s, we got public school for everyone for a few years. I mean, maybe 4 or 6 years and so on. And also voting rights for men, late 1900s, and then women later on. So this was a way, of course, of liberalizing society, making it more attractive to stay. And that's also when our industry started booming. And a lot of the inventions that we are still living off were invented. So in Sweden, we have, over these 100 years, created a system where if you, for one reason or another, can't work, or you are unemployed, there is a minimum amount of money that you get so that you can sustain yourself, so that you can hopefully stay in your house, or if your house is too expensive, at least you have somewhere to live. You're never put on the street, and that you can feed yourself and you get a child allowance. Then, of course, if you're a member of a trade union and you get unemployed, then you have totally other benefits, but that's because you paid into it. That's not something provided by the government at all. So there is this kind of minimum existence level that you get if there's absolutely nothing else for you. So that creates a safety, and that also creates a way of people taking risks. Sweden is, together with Switzerland, the most innovative country in the world. So it's kind of that people dare to take risks because you know that you will never totally fail and be out on the street. So in a way, we have created a society where the individual should be able to, rise to its fullest potential, just like in America. But here it's, if you're super bright, you can get the scholarship to any fantastic school. The world. I mean, here it's full of possibilities, even though it's difficult sometimes. Here in Sweden as well. So it should never be about who your family is, what connections you have. Everyone should be able to go to, get a good education and be innovative and what have you. And there is that social protection. But of course, we pay for it. It costs us a lot of money. But as I said, there's great support for. In Sweden, when the election time, it's just like here, we talk about taxes. And then some parties say, oh, lower taxes. Yes, by 1%. It's fine-tuning a system that most political parties really agree upon is the model we should keep. There's never a discussion on the welfare model as such. That was a long answer to maybe a question you didn't pose.
No, but that's wonderful. We have a couple of questions that are asking about Sweden's foreign policy. So one aspect of that is dealing with Brexit, and so how Brexit has affected both Sweden's relationship with Britain, and also if it's affected Sweden's relationship within the EU and with the EU. And another aspect of this foreign policy question, circling back to the feminist foreign policy, was about how does a feminist foreign policy affect your relationship with other countries? So the particular example was Saudi Arabia. So how does the fact that Saudi Arabia imprisoned a woman for driving or for demanding the right to drive, how does that shape or affect the relationship that Sweden has with the country in question, in this case, Saudi Arabia?
Well, thank you for two great questions. The first one, of course, we really are very sad that the UK decided to leave the European Union. Sweden and the United Kingdom is very like-minded on so many issues. So even, we are all equal members of the European Union, the 28 countries when they were still there. But of course, in reality, and most of us know it, when the UK, France, and Germany struck a compromise, it was usually a compromise all of us could live with. And Italy was probably sometimes part of that compromise as well. No, but you know, that there's no secret. I mean, that's how it also works. Even if we all have veto rights on the foreign policy and so on. But still, and usually that was a balanced then compromise that we could all live with. And we, for us, of those three, we were closest to the UK. So when they left in that dark room, it's only two countries now, Germany and France. So we will now have to find more other like-minded countries within the Union who we can work with. And usually we have to then cooperate with more countries. So when I worked at home 3.5, 4 years ago, we started to do an analysis of on which issues were our closest countries. It could shift from issue to issue, but who do we bond with? But no secret, I mean, we are most like-minded with the Northern European countries. And that's, you know, comes to when we look at foreign policy and the threat of Russia, for instance, that is perceived as much greater in our part of the world than maybe, for instance, in Spain. So all these factors are, of course, playing into who you collaborate with. But of course, this was a decision by the British people, but we really regret it. We would have loved for them to stay. The UK is one of our greatest trading partners. Just in London, I mean, we're a country of 10 million people. 100,000 Swedes lived in London. So I'm sure many of them stay, but many of them also leave. So we now want to create the best possible relationship between the UK and the European Union. We need each other, and also bilaterally Sweden and the United Kingdom, of course. We cooperate on defense and many other aspects as well. So I think the European Union is a bit poorer without the United Kingdom. But that's democracy for you. The feminist foreign policy, yes, of course. Having the feminist foreign policy has, of course, even more, even if it was always on our radar, it highlighted women's issues even more. So, of course, we have, just as the European Union has done, and, you know, we have a common foreign and security policy in the European Union, we have been vocal with Saudi Arabia. But we have also been working with Saudi Arabia. I remember 3-4 years ago when I was home, we had groups of women from Saudi Arabia coming to Sweden to study different things. I don't exactly remember the fields now, but that has been an area where we have been reaching out. But of course, whenever human rights are challenged, we make our voice heard.
Thank you for that. Manuel, if you don't have I have another kind of cluster of questions that are dealing in various ways with backlash. So when you're promoting gender equality, there's different forms that it could take. So objections to gender quotas that the best person should get the job, and by implication, you're not pursuing that with any kind of quota system. Or in the context of the tax policy, if you tax individually couples in the US, that could be perceived as an attack on the family. So how do you kind of deal with various forms of backlash and objections that are raised that can be of different kinds, but that are impediments or forms of resistance?
Well, if I start out with taxation, you know, it's 50 years ago that we started with individual taxation. So that is not questioned at all. There is no, there was one political party who raised it a while ago, but they were really slapped on the fingers immediately. No one wants to go back to that, really. That's not a discussion. And also when it comes, we don't have gender quotas in Sweden for anything really. So it's voluntary for companies to have, you know, look at their boards. Of course, it's encouraged, and it's getting better because, of course, also corporations realize that the customers, half of the customers or even more, are women. And I mean, it's the right thing to do. And also, if you want to attract the best workforce, and as I said earlier in my speech, women have better grades than men these days. More women than men finish university. So if you want to tap into future talent, you have to be a woman-friendly company as well. And of course, if you then have a board or a management that is only for from one sex, Of course, that's not very attractive when you want to employ the best and the brightest. So that's one thing. And also for public companies that are owned by the government or run by government, there the CEOs are 50-50 men and women. So of course, but that's the government who hires and decides, so to speak. But for the private sector, it's not like that anymore, but it's slowly and gradually going there as many more women enter the labor market. But we don't believe in quotas. And also in parliament, the political parties, they take upon themselves to be gender equal. So the Social Democrats, I don't know how many years ago, they said every other should be a woman. So, in Sweden, we have, when you get elected, it's you vote for a party, just like here, but not so much for the individual candidate. But every other person on the list of people getting into parliament should then be a woman. And other parties have followed suit as well. So our parliament is basically gender equal now. But what we have more, which I think you are much better at here in the US, you don't have age discrimination. And of course, people are, officially not age discriminated against, but I wonder how many people there are in our parliament who are older than 70. Very few. And as I'm getting older, I'm getting more and more concerned about this. Where us older people, we should also be there.
There is a very interesting question, I think, in chat about the question of refugees, a question that certainly has seen Sweden at the center of the international attention. We know that women, the LGBTQ community and children are often the victims of violence as migrants. And when they arrive in a country like Sweden, they have been subject to all sorts of violence. What kind of policies Sweden has implemented to address the question of refugee women and perhaps other protected categories when it comes to the question of refugees?
Well, when you seek asylum in Sweden, I think we have an international kind of agreement on what basis you can seek asylum. So if you are, for instance, sexually harassed or harassed because of your sexual orientation, that can be basis for getting asylum. If you come from a country where, this is kind of the state where you are or the culture where you are, where this is, where you are put in danger because of that. That could be a reason for getting asylum. So also, of course, we have over the years have a lot of refugees going back to the 50s and 60s and 70s. And then with the war in the Balkans, in the 90s, a lot of people from Yugoslavia, a lot of people from Afghanistan, Somalia, now the last years, Syria, and so on. And this has become a big, quite infected political debate in my country about migration and refugees and so on. But there are, of course, women's issues that are looked upon. For instance, if someone has been genetically mutilated, we try to help and so on. So there are various programs to try to help women. One of the challenges we've had is that many of the people who've then gotten asylum or come to Sweden, they come from more patriarchal societies where women, as I said, do not take part in society to the same extent, and the women don't learn the language to the same extent, and they don't work to the same extent. So there are programs trying to get, get in contact with the women, offer Swedish lessons, helping them get a job, etc., etc. So that is a policy. It's not always successful. It is difficult because of cultural reasons. And of course, people don't change immediately just because you cross a border. You carry with you your culture and your values, and that's fine, absolutely. But, we really want women to have the possibility to work and learn the language and be part of our society, as well as men, of course. But usually it's easier for men.
Manuel, do we have time for one more question? I'm not sure.
Yes, I'm all yours till 3, an hour more. So you decide.
So I think yes, the last round of questions, Colleen, and then we can take a brief break, and then we have a session with the students, I think, but perhaps
Great.
some other people might want to join, or we can talk about that later. But I think we should also give our gracious speaker a little bit of a break. So
That's okay. This is so fun.
So the last question for the to wrap things up was just to get your opinion on, and this is from one member of the audience, on Sweden's response to COVID-19. So how do you view how Sweden has responded?
Well, with both failure and success, I would say this has been extremely difficult, as it's been for all of us. Sweden was highlighted in the media here during the spring because there is a myth in the United States that in Sweden we basically didn't do anything. That's completely wrong. Most people have been working from home. About 70% of people in Sweden have been working from home. We didn't close daycare, and we didn't close up to middle school. Because early on we saw, or our agency for health agency saw, that the virus didn't seem to spread in schools. So when the decision to let our schools be open, it was taken out of like whole of health perspective. It was realized that younger children would mentally fare worse by not being in school. So that was the reason why the schools were open, and it didn't really spread among children. Then also, if we would have closed down the school, as I said, in Sweden, we have a labor participation of 85% in total, men and women. If we would have closed down the schools, 30% of our healthcare workers would have to stay at home. And as you know, our healthcare systems are really under extreme pressure, and the people working there are superheroes. So that was a combination, but the most important factor of keeping the schools open was the mental health of the children. So that is the biggest difference between our countries. And then there's a discussion on face masks, which we have not used in Sweden. Now it's been introduced for parts of public transportation. And also we have a different, the legislation is different in Sweden. The pandemic law we had was based on recommendations. We recommend people to do things and expect them to follow. This is not the case always. So the biggest failure we have made is that we didn't, just like here, we weren't able to protect the most vulnerable, that is our people in the elderly care facilities. And then you must also note that in Sweden, you only move to an elderly facility when you are so weak that you cannot live alone. For instance, my own father, he is wheelchair bound, and now he lives with my mother, who is he's 91, she's 87, but he has home care. So every day, 5 times a day, they come from the municipality, they help him get out of bed, they help him get dressed and so on. In many other places, he would live in an elderly care facility, but you only get moved there when you are so weak that you cannot stay at home. So of course, getting the virus into the elderly care facility was horrendous. So most of the people in Sweden, 90% of the people who have died in Sweden are older than 70. And 50 or 40% of those have been in our elderly care facilities. And this has not been handled well. And, that's our politicians say that. And, it's become much better. Now with the vaccines, we have vaccinated a lot of people in the elderly care facilities. So the death rates and the sickness rates in the elderly care facilities have gone down dramatically the last month. But we all lack vaccines right now. So that's an issue, of course. So it might on the surface have looked like a very different strategy, but in reality, it wasn't really. So there are lots of misconceptions about our strategy, but, I think everyone has tried to do the best they could. And if we look at Europe, of course, Norway and Finland has fared much, much, much better than Sweden. But otherwise, we are at the same level as everyone else. Basically. So if you've done lockdowns, that didn't seem to help. If you've carried it out like we did, it didn't seem to help. So it is extremely difficult. And I hope that we, by when we're out of this and we do real analysis, that we can learn what has been the best practice, because I think all of us needs to learn that. And this, I mean, I'm not trying to excuse anything of what's been going wrong in Sweden, but it's not as different as you might think. And not as different as it's been portrayed in the American media or international media.
Thank you so much. I think it's time for us to thank Her Excellency, to thank Colleen Murphy for being so generous. I think the only good thing about the fact that this is a virtual meeting is that otherwise we would certainly try to keep Her Excellency with us for the rest of the week or even longer, because we have enjoyed her talk so much. This is the end of our keynote address. Before you leave, I just want to remind you of a coming event on March 5th. We have a Zoom representation of the Suppliants, Aeschylus tragedy about refugees, with a fantastic multinational theater company that will do a dramatic reading and an acting of the tragedy with some participation from the audience. Please do look for this event. We hope it's going to be both engaging and certainly educational for all of us. It's also the inaugural event for IAPP Greece, this new initiative that the university is conducting to establish more relationships with many Greek institutions. So it functions as both our EU Day of the Arts, as a way to talk again about the question of refugees, and as a launching initiative for a new partnership between the University of Illinois and Greek institutions. Now, Her Excellency has kindly agreed to be available for another 40 minutes or so. To students, we want to encourage student participation. And so if you are a student, please look in chat. You will find a link. This is not going to be a webinar, but just a regular Zoom meeting, which will allow for more direct interaction and participation. Again, this is an event thought mostly for students. We don't want to be guilty of ageism here, but we do want to give an opportunity to our younger colleagues to ask questions and have their own time directly with the ambassador. Again, thank you so much. Thank you again, all of you, for coming. Thank you, Colleen. And please remain in touch with the European Union Center for many more initiatives, including many more initiatives on Sweden. We hope to bring Her Excellency back in person, but even before that, we hope to have many initiatives on the Green New Deal and the role of Sweden in promoting a green and sustainable economy within the EU and as a model for the United States, while we are looking at the same issues of climate change and sustainability. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm extremely honored, and thank you for all the great questions you posed. And do come and study in Sweden. Thank you.